If things go static, the stories die, because life is never static. In 1998, after writing Toy Story and A Bug's Life, I was completely hooked on screenwriting. I had now written on 2 movies, and I wanted to do whatever I needed to improve my storytelling skills. So I read every book on the subject, every script I could find. And in all my research, I came across this fantastic quote by the British playwright William Archer. And it was, "Drama is anticipation mingled with uncertainty." I think this is an incredibly insightful definition. When you're telling a story, have you constructed anticipation? In the short term, have you maybe want to know what will happen next? But more importantly, in the long term, have you maybe want to know how it will all come together, how it will all conclude? Have you constructed honest conflicts that are born of truth, that create doubt in me about whether it may go this way or that way? Finding Nemo has got a good example of that, in the sense that in the short term, the tension is always, will Dory, because of her short-term memory, forget what the father is saying to her? But underneath that is always the global tension, the long-term tension of, will we ever find Nemo in this vast ocean? In our earliest days at Pixar, before we truly understood the invisible workings of story, we were simply a group of talented artists who just had a gut instinct. And that's all for story. That's all we did, was we just ran with our gut. And it's funny to look back and see where that led us on Toy Story. You have to remember that in those years, the popular movies in animation were Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Lion King. So when Tom Hanks came to be pitched the role of playing Woody, and he walked into the room to hear the story for the first time, he said, "You don't want me to sing, do you?" And I thought that was pretty much epitomized exactly what everybody thought animation was. I thought that's all you could do with it. And that was part of what frustrated us, is we knew it was so many other possibilities that you could have with it. So we had a little invisible sort of rule sheet that we made for ourselves. We weren't important, we didn't have much power then, so we had to sort of keep our rebellious instincts private. And our list had no songs, no I want moment, no happy village, no love story, and no villain. And the ironic thing is that for the whole first year that we worked on the movie, it did not work. We didn't know, because it was our first time, that that's normal. And Disney was panicking. And they privately, on their side, looked for some consultation from other storytellers to see what maybe was wrong. And they talked to a very famous lyricist who they thought could give them some advice. And he sent them a fax with suggestions after seeing our work. And we got a hold of that fax. And this is what he said: there should be songs, there should be an I Want song, there should be a Happy Village song, there should be a love story, and there should be a villain. Well, we didn't do any of that for Toy Story. And thank goodness, because we were so young, rebellious, and contrarian at the time. All that discovery of the facts did was make us determined to prove that you could build a different kind of story. And when we finally did conquer that story another year and a half later, it taught us that storytelling has guidelines, not rules. Another fundamental story lesson on Toy Story was concerning your main character. Liking your main character, basically. You hear that term thrown around a lot. We want to like our main character, like our main character. And we had this interesting problem, is that we knew he had to become a selfless toy at the end. He had to share his role or give it up. So we naively thought that, well, that means you have to start at the opposite. You have to start selfish. And when you start selfish, this is what you get. Good luck, translator.
What do you think you're doing? Off the bed. Hey! Off the bed!
You gonna make us, Woody?
No. He is. Slinky! Slinky! Get up here and do your job! Are you deaf? I said take care of them!
I'm sorry, Woody, but I have to agree with him. I don't think what you did was right.
What? Am I hearing correctly? You don't think I was right? Who said your job was to think, Spring Wiener?
Why?
Not very nice. And of course that didn't work. So how do you make a selfish character likable? Well, we ended up making his situation conditional. He could afford to be kind, generous, benevolent, funny. He could be all these wonderful things on one condition: as long as he got to stay the top favorite toy for Andy. And he didn't even know himself that that was a conditional requirement for himself. And that's how we all live life. We all live life conditionally. And we don't often know what's going to be the one thing that makes us say, okay, all bets are off. I'm not playing by the rules anymore. I didn't sign up for that. Understanding a character's unconscious conditions is how you prevent them from being cliche, and how you can possibly make them look more likable, or understandable, or to have empathy. I've gone to the well of that Woody epiphany ever since to remind myself of how my characters must be wired up more complex than I'm initially thinking. Before I'd even decided to make storytelling my career, I can now see there were key lessons in my youth on the subject. In 1986, that's the year I truly started to understand what the idea of theme meant, or a premise in a story. 1986 in the United States saw the reconstructed re-release of Lawrence of Arabia. And I was spellbound. I must have seen it 7 times in 1 month. You could just feel that you were in the hands of a grand design. That there was a point to every scene, every shot, every line. Yet, on the surface, to my 21-year-old brain, the movie just seemed to convey the historical plot points of T.E. Lawrence. He was a British soldier who greatly influenced Arabia in World War I. Yet I could sense it was saying more than that, but what exactly? And then on one of my last viewings, after I'd become so familiar with the material, I was able to look past the surface. A veil was lifted when this scene played out, right after Lawrence has crossed the Sinai Desert on foot and reached the Suez Canal. That was the theme. Who are you? Here were all these seemingly disparate events and dialogues, yet on the surface were being taken simply as a linear progression of historical events that happened to Lawrence. Yet underneath it all was a constant, a guideline, a roadmap. Everything Lawrence did in that movie was an attempt for him to figure out who he was, where his place was in the world. A strong theme is always running through a well-told story. In 1983, I actually got rejected from the college I went to, California Institute of the Arts, for character animation. I didn't get in my first year. My life drawings weren't good enough. But thankfully, in my rejection letter, the school suggested how I could improve myself, how I could apply again the next year, which I did. They said I should observe life more, study people, their habits, their quirks, gain the eyes of an anthropologist. A perfect example of this happened recently. I was talking to Pete Docter, who's another director at Pixar, and he was reminiscing about having meetings with Steve Jobs. Everybody knows Steve Jobs always wore the same thing all the time. He had a black turtleneck, jeans, and sneakers. But Pete would get distracted in meetings and notice that he had holes on either side of his pant legs, on both sides, and he couldn't figure out why. And every time he showed up at meetings, holes on one, wonder what jeans he was wearing. And finally one day, Steve was talking, and in the middle of talking, he just grabbed his socks. And he just pulled them up like that while he talked. And not only did it answer the question of why, but it also tells you how much a creature, for me, I consider the most important ingredient that you could ever put in a story, yet is so often lacking. My mother took me to see this.
Come on, it's all right. Look, the water is stiff.
I walked out of that theater wide-eyed with wonder. And I think that's the key ingredient, of what I would call the secret sauce. Can you invoke wonder? Wonder is honest, it's completely innocent, and it cannot be artificially evoked. It cannot be manufactured. For me, there is no greater ability than to gift another human being with that feeling. To hold them still just for a brief moment in their day and have them surrender to wonder. And when it's tapped, the affirmation of being alive reaches you on almost a cellular level. And when an artist does that to another artist, the recipient is almost compelled to pass it on. It's like a dormant command that is suddenly activated in you, like a call to Devil's Tower in Close Encounters. Do unto others what's been done to you. The best stories infuse you with wonder. In 1969, I was 4 years old, and I have a vivid memory of discovering these 2 pinpoint scars on my ankle and asking my father what they were. And he said I had 2 just like it on my head, but I couldn't see it because of my hair. And he went on to explain to me that when I was born premature, that I came out much too early, that I wasn't fully baked yet, that I was very, very sick, and that the doctor took one look at this little yellow child with black teeth and told my mom I wasn't going to live. And I was in the hospital for months and months, but I lived, and that made me special. Now, I don't know if I really believe that. I don't know if my parents did, but I did not want to prove them wrong. So whatever I ended up being good at, I was going to strive to be worthy of the second chance I was given.
There. It's okay, Daddy's here. Daddy's got you. I promise I will never let anything happen to you. Nemo.
And that's the first story lesson I ever learned. Draw from what you know. Doesn't always mean plot. Doesn't always mean fact. It means capturing a truth from your experience, expressing values that you personally feel deep down to your core. And that's what ultimately led me to speaking to you here today about story. Thank you.